The moment the stretcher burst through the emergency doors, the entire trauma wing seemed to hold its breath. Blood stained the sheets, alarms screamed, and in the center of it all lay a wounded Navy SEAL, barely conscious, his chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. But what stopped every doctor, nurse, and medic in their tracks wasn't just the severity of his injuries. It was the large K9 standing guard over him, teeth bared, muscles coiled, eyes blazing with fierce devotion, refusing to let anyone come close. The dog's low growl echoed like a warning, "Cross this line, and pay the price." In that frozen moment, fear and awe collided, and no one knew how to save the man without risking their own lives. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unseen bonds that hold us together in our darkest moments, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. The wounded SEAL's name was Aaron Cole, a seasoned operator known among his unit for calm under fire and unwavering loyalty. He had been pulled from a disastrous mission in a remote desert region, his body torn by shrapnel, dehydration, and exhaustion. The only reason he had survived long enough to reach the hospital in North Carolina was the dog standing over him now, a Belgian Malinois named Ranger. Ranger wasn't just a military working dog, he was Aaron's shadow, trained to detect explosives, track enemies, and protect his handler with absolute commitment. On the battlefield, Ranger had dragged Aaron out of the line of fire, shielding him from further harm, and refusing to leave his side even as medevac helicopters thundered overhead. Now, in the sterile brightness of the emergency room, Ranger saw every unfamiliar face as a threat. Doctors tried to approach, voices calm, hands raised slowly, but each step closer made Ranger growl louder, his body rigid, ready to strike. Security hovered at a distance, uncertain how to intervene without escalating the danger. Time was slipping away. Aaron's blood pressure was dropping, and every delay increased the risk of losing him. The medical team faced a cruel paradox. To save the soldier, they needed to get past the dog who had already saved his life. Among the nurses standing near the back of the room was a young woman named Grace Miller, barely 6 months into her first hospital job. She was small, with tired eyes and a gentle presence that often went unnoticed in the chaos of trauma care. Growing up in a military family, Grace had spent her childhood moving from base to base, learning early about sacrifice, duty, and loss. Her older brother had served in a special operations unit before being killed in action, and that grief had driven her to become a nurse, hoping to give others the care her family had once desperately needed. As she watched Ranger stand guard, something deep in her chest stirred, a mix of fear, empathy, and recognition. Grace noticed details others missed. The way Ranger's ears flicked at certain sounds, the way his eyes kept darting back to Aaron's face, the way his stance softened whenever Aaron stirred. This wasn't just aggression, it was desperate protection. Grace remembered fragments of her brother's stories, of special unit protocols and code words used to calm military dogs in extreme stress. They were rarely shared, but sometimes, in quiet moments, he had spoken about them, trusting her with those secrets. Her heart pounded as she realized that this knowledge might be the only bridge between the dog and the doctors. Ignoring the warning looks from her colleagues, Grace stepped forward, her hands trembling. Every instinct told her to stay back, but something stronger pulled her ahead. She stopped several feet from Ranger, meeting his gaze without challenging it, her voice low and steady. She whispered a short sequence of words and numbers, an obscure unit code designed to signal safety and reassurance to K9s trained for combat. The room fell silent, waiting. Ranger's growl faltered. His body remained tense, but his head tilted slightly, confusion flickering across his sharp features. Grace repeated the code, slower this time, her voice filled with calm and sincerity. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ranger took a step back from the stretcher. The shift was so subtle that many missed it, but Grace saw it, and hope surged through her. She continued speaking softly, adding gentle hand signals she remembered from training demonstrations she had once watched as a teenager. Gradually, Ranger retreated another step, his posture easing just enough to allow a doctor to edge forward. The medical team moved with controlled urgency, seizing the precious opening. As they worked, Grace stayed close, murmuring the code whenever Ranger's anxiety spiked. The dog never fully relaxed, but he allowed the treatment to continue, his eyes never leaving Aaron's face. Hours passed in a blur of surgery, transfusions, and tense waiting. Grace remained nearby, her scrub streaked with sweat and exhaustion, her heart heavy with worry for a man she had never met. When Aaron was finally stabilized and transferred to intensive care, Ranger lay down beside the bed, his chin resting on the edge of the mattress, refusing to move. Hospital administrators debated removing him, citing policy and safety concerns, but the lead surgeon intervened, insisting that the dog's presence might be as vital to recovery as any medication. Over the next several days, Grace became a constant presence in Aaron's room. She monitored his vitals, adjusted 4 lines, and spoke softly about mundane things: sunlight outside the window, the rhythm of hospital life, small stories meant to anchor him to the world. Ranger watched her closely, but the tension between them had softened into cautious trust. Sometimes, when Grace gently stroked his fur, he closed his eyes, just for a moment, as if allowing himself a fragile rest. Aaron remained unconscious, drifting between dreams and pain, but subtle signs of improvement began to appear. His breathing steadied, his wounds slowly responded to treatment, and the swelling in his brain began to decrease. Doctors credited medical skill and sheer resilience, but Grace believed Ranger played a role too. The dog's unwavering presence seemed to tether Aaron to life, a living reminder of everything he had fought for. One evening, as rain streaked down the windows and the hospital corridors grew quiet, Aaron finally opened his eyes. Confusion clouded his gaze as he took in the unfamiliar room, the beeping machines, and then, at last, Ranger's face inches from his own. A faint smile tugged at his lips, and a tear slipped down his temple. In that moment, the weight of survival and loss pressed in on him, and his chest shuddered with silent emotion. Grace stood nearby, pretending to check his chart, giving him space for that reunion. In the days that followed, Aaron learned what had happened. How Ranger had protected him in the field, how the dog had refused to let anyone near, and how a rookie nurse had used a forgotten code to break through that wall of fear. When he was strong enough, Aaron asked to meet her. Their conversation was quiet and simple, filled with gratitude that needed no grand words. Grace never spoke about her brother, but in her gentle care, Aaron felt the echo of that sacrifice. Recovery was slow and painful. There were moments when despair crept in, when the memories of combat and the weight of injury threatened to overwhelm him. In those moments, Ranger would press close, a solid, steady presence, while Grace offered calm reassurance and practical hope. Together, they formed an unlikely circle of healing, bound by loyalty, compassion, and shared understanding. Months later, Aaron took his first unassisted steps outside the hospital, sunlight warming his face, Ranger trotting proudly at his side. Grace watched from the doorway, her eyes shining with quiet pride. She knew her role in his story was just one chapter, but it was enough. It reminded her why she had chosen this path, why kindness and courage mattered even in the smallest acts. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment below and share what this journey made you feel. Your words can inspire others who may be struggling in silence. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of loyalty, compassion, and second chances, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories of hope into the world. As Aaron and Ranger disappeared into the bright afternoon, Grace returned to her work, carrying with her a renewed sense of purpose. In a place often defined by loss and urgency, she had witnessed something extraordinary, a bond so strong it defied fear, a code that bridged trust, and a reminder that sometimes, the smallest voice can change everything.